when we talk about events like D-Day or any events occurring throughout World War II, some of us may gloss over in our classroom studies when we hear about it because it's such, in theory, such a far-off place. We're standing here in North America, they fought over in Europe, as well as the Pacific Islands, as well as Africa, and I'm already getting into too much information than the average textbook tells you about World War II. In any case, we don't often think about these events directly impacting the home front, communities that we live in today. I'm in a seemingly ordinary town in Virginia. This is Bedford, Virginia, but Bedford, Virginia has an incredible story attached with D-Day. Bedford, Virginia suffered the most losses for a single American community on June 6, 1944. This is the story of the Bedford Boys. Bedford, Virginia was no different from any other small American town when the Great Depression hit. With most industries crippled financially, people had to look for alternatives to support themselves and their loved ones. For young men in town and the surrounding countryside, the best option appeared to be enrollment with the local National Guard outfit, Company A of the 116th Infantry Regiment. While the unit had a storied lineage that could be traced back to the colonial days, by the 1930s, it was less of a military unit and more of a gentleman's club. For a steady paycheck, the men of Company A got food, stayed fit, and issued uniforms from the Great War to parade in important civic events. None could have anticipated that they would see any serious action beyond their summer maneuvers, the most popular of which were the ones at Manassas, where the men got to imagine themselves as their forefathers in the American Civil War. The lifestyle of Bedford was shaken in October of 1940, when Company A received orders to mobilize for 1 year's Army training. The federalization of the National Guard was a move made by Congress and the Roosevelt administration to prepare the country for the possibility of joining the ongoing conflicts in Europe and Asia. After a massive dance to wish them the best of fortune, the Bedford Boys shipped out from the Norfolk and Western train station on February 18, 1941, to begin what was hoped to only be a year removed from family and friends. They joined 300,000 guardsmen from across the country that would endure the rough training and living conditions of the U.S. Army, hoping it would all be superfluous. Those hopes were destroyed with the attack on Pearl Harbor, followed by the United States declaration of war. Training continued at Fort Meade, Maryland, as the Bedford Boys' free time was spent rationing the limited home passes they earned. After being moved to Jacksonville, Florida, word reached out that Company A, along with the whole of the 29th Infantry Division, was to be sent overseas. Several wives and sweethearts of the Bedford Boys organized a farewell trip to Florida. Then, in September of 1942, the 29th Infantry Division were shipped to New Jersey and commenced an Atlantic crossing on board the Queen Mary. After a harrowing voyage that included a collision with a British destroyer, the Bedford Boys arrived in England to take part in the most rigorous training in military history. For 18 months, Allied forces prepared for the amphibious assaults that would hopefully lead to the liberation of France. The Bedford Boys undertook weekly marches that spanned up to 25 miles, long hours of swimming in frigid waters, and mock beach assaults. In the limited time for leisure, they frequented the pubs and got a sense of the effects the aerial bombardments by Germany had, making them think how lucky Bedford, Virginia was compared to other small communities around the world in the Second World War. At home in Virginia, Bedford was calm but anxious. Rationing on resources became irritable for many, but the war had brought a resurgence in production for the factories, now making supplies for the war effort, and employing just about every able-bodied woman in the area. But the town was constantly kept on edge by the letters that came back from the front. The county at large had individuals serving beyond England, reporting back about actions in the Pacific and Italy. It was common knowledge Company A would eventually be part of an attack on occupied France, but when it would occur, nobody knew. By the spring of 1944, Company A, the 116th Infantry Regiment, had been molded into one of the premier companies of the entire U.S. Army. Over the course of training, many of its original members found themselves transferred to other units and assignments. They would be replaced by men that came from a few northern states, especially New York. Company A was truly living up to their division's moniker of the Blue and Gray Division. Still, a third of the company were Bedford Boys. Regardless of their hometown, all were united in their eagerness to put their training into motion along the coast of Normandy. Their good morale placed them amongst the first in order of battle for the assault. The only question now lingered: when was D-Day occurring? After multiple delays, D-Day commenced on June 6, 1944. Although the seas were rough, Captain Taylor Failers was determined to get Company A on the beaches in time. Their mission was to land on the Dog Green sector of Omaha Beach and capture a ravine labeled D1 Draw. Possession over this ravine would allow the Allied forces to move inland and outflank artillery and machine gun emplacements on the bluffs above. Amongst those in Company A filling the landing crafts in the pre-dawn light were approximately 30 Bedford Boys. From the moment the landing craft were launched, things did not go well for Company A. Two of their craft collided, causing one to sink. Then came the concussion of the coastal bombardments made by American warships, threatening to swamp the landing craft. In the midst of the choppy Atlantic, the first wave did manage to land on Dog Green as scheduled. They hit the beaches in good order, aware of the daunting task expected to be achieved. But with over 500 yards of open beach to cover, under constant watch by MG-42s that could fire 1,000 rounds in a minute, the situation appeared hopeless. As the fighting wore on, the rising tide forced everyone to move closer toward the heavily guarded bluffs. Try as they might to advance, many of the Bedford Boys fell upon the beach in the opening minutes of attack. It would not be until 2 p.m. that D1 Draw was in the hands of the Allied forces. Not with grand strategies was it taken, but with the grit and luck of ad hoc teams organized by soldiers themselves on the beaches. Omaha Beach stands out as the bloodiest of the 5 amphibious assaults made on D-Day. While D-Day today is celebrated as a major victory for the Allied forces, those that survived getting through the D1 Draw had to face the terrible losses their companies had suffered. Company A, the 116th Infantry Regiment, had endured nearly a 90% casualty rate. Of Company A's Bedford Boys, 19 were dead. So, if you want to learn more about the Bedford Boys history and you're in Bedford, Virginia, you definitely need to make a stop here at the Bedford Boys Tribute Center. It was opened up in 2019 in the former Green's Drug Store. This store was in operation at the time of World War II and was a regular hangout spot for a lot of the Bedford Boys before they went into service, and would also be where the town of Bedford learned the terrible news about what happened to their boys on June 6, 1944. However, they didn't actually get that information for almost a whole month after. On the morning of July 17, 1944, Elizabeth Teese took her position at the Western Union telegram booth situated within Green's Drug Store. There was already a sense that Bedford must have lost some of its servicemen, as news from the front had grown scarce since D-Day. But the severity was not made official until the first message wired to Miss Teese that morning read, "Good morning, Bedford. We have casualties." The falling stream of telegrams appeared endless. Staff and customers aided Miss Teese in assembling the text to note cards. Multiple Bedford residents volunteered to make the difficult deliveries of the death notices to the corresponding loved ones in both town and countryside. And the devastating loss to the community were not over, as the Allied forces moved deeper into northern France, incurring more casualties. But as of the D-Day losses, Bedford, Virginia had suffered the battle's highest casualties per capita of any individual American community. The weight of Bedford's D-Day losses was so severe that the notion of a museum dedicated to the community's sacrifice did not come to light until after the last surviving Bedford boy passed away in 2016. The Tribute Center was fittingly opened in Green's Drug Store in 2019 and has come to act as a shrine to the Bedford Boys. Personal effects loaned by family members have accumulated over the museum's first few years of operation, providing a visceral way to educate about the lives lost in Bedford, Virginia, to ensure the liberation of France and the ultimate fall of Nazi Germany would succeed. So this is pretty cool. This photograph was taken when the Bedford Boys marched off to go into training for World War II. And this is actually the drugstore we're in currently. This here is a brick main street. And a few years after World War II, Main Street, they tore all the bricks up because they were going to blacktop it. Well, somebody actually was smart enough to preserve some of those bricks. And here they are. So these are the actual bricks in front of Grange Drugstore that the Bedford Boys marched over in 1941. And then the story gets even crazier. In 2019, right when this tribute center opened, um, Charles Reynolds Charles Reynolds Sr. came to the tribute center, and he identified himself as being one of the musicians carrying a tuba in the marching band, or trombone. My apologies, a trombone in the marching band. And he requested that should he pass away, that the trombone be given to the tribute center. Well, fortunately, about a few weeks after visiting the tribute center, Mr. Reynolds did pass away. Sure enough, the family gave the trombone to the museum. So this pair of dice was found on Wallace Carter, who was one of the Bedford Boys killed during D-Day. And well, it's believed that this pair of dice actually won him a lot of money during the trip to England. The Bedford Boys were shipped over on the Queen Mary, and well, they passed the time by gambling. And apparently, in a game of dice, eventually Wallace ended up winning. He ended up winning like $500 at a game, sent it back here to Bedford, and it was the largest sum of money his family really had ever seen. Uh, Due to the gambling, as you can see here, Mr. Carter, was known as Snake Jr., ran the pool hall with his brother Alan, who was just known simply as Snake Eyes. Bedford, Virginia had multiple factories that converted to producing materials for the war effort. One of them, Hampton Looms, which, by the way, these companies, the majority of the women in Bedford, Virginia, including some of those that were related or married with the Bedford Boys, they were employed by these companies, so they were directly making these materials. This uniform was actually made by Hampton Looms. And then over here we have a piece of, looks like a parachute here from Blenheim Henning, a silk mill. It was a silk mill. I am being very drawn toward this stall helm. You can see they have painted it, which is interesting. In addition, they put a number of areas where the 29th Division were engaged. Now, this actually is from the 2nd Battalion, 175th Infantry Regiment. But these were locations similar that Company A of the 116th Infantry Regiment would have fought in. And of course, in the back, July 17th, 1944, St. Lo. And some of you older ones that are tuning in are going to cringe when I say this. The reason I know about the Battle of St. Lo, it's the opening level for Call of Duty Free. You get to take part in the Battle of St. Lo, and for whatever reason, that name is always stuck in the back of my brain. But of course, on the front, you also have where the Normandy landed itself. Actually, it says June 7th. That's interesting. Yeah, I've not really seen pieces. I've seen war relics like this be brought back and be marked with war honors, but being it painted everything, it's in pretty good condition. It's very interesting. Exploring Bedford, we've seen several of these honor rolls for companies and churches in the community, denoting those that were serving, and unfortunately later denoting those that had been lost in action. This one was relating to the Nazareth Methodist Church, and you can actually see on there Captain Fellers is amongst those that are listed. I also see down several other names. Now, initially, all the Bedford Boys that were lost on D-Day or throughout the liberation of France, they would be interred in Europe, which was common for all of the American soldiers that fell during this operation. However, beginning around 1947 and 1948, the United States government is going to offer the ability for families to return the remains of their loved ones back stateside. And about, I think it's 8 of the Bedford Boys actually are going to be interred right here at the Bedford cemeteries. Initially Greenwood, but it's also Oakwood and Logwood Cemetery. This is the town cemetery here. So we're going to explore, we're going to see if we can locate the graves of the Bedford Boys and see if we find a few other very important graves relating to Bedford history. Now we're looking at the grave for John Reynolds, another Bedford boy that was killed on June 6. The local community have placed at all of the Bedford Boys markers to make them easily identifiable. They put these white signs up so you can see it from the roadway. Well, keep that in mind. We were informed when we went to the tribute center during our trip that something eerie happened here at the cemetery, because you'll notice you have Reynolds here. There's his captain, Captain Fellers. He's buried over there. Just a few graves down would have been one of Reynolds' mates. Over here we have Ray Stevens' grave. If you look behind me, you'll get to see the grave for John Wilkes. And then you may even be able to see a little bit farther back there, there's a couple, you can actually see it back there, the white sign got all the way back there, Clifton's grave. But up here there's just this cluster of all the Bedford Boys. This has nothing to do with D-Day. The Tribute Center staff told us this simply is because the families have been here for so long in Bedford, Virginia, that these lots were laid out almost 100 years before Second World War occurred. So it's just by mere coincidence that all of these folks who were killed on June 6 are buried in close proximity to each other. Keep in mind, when we talk about the Bedford Boys, we're usually focusing on the Company A of the 116th Infantry Regiment. That doesn't mean there weren't other people from Bedford involved in World War II. This is a perfect example. This is Private First Class John W. Allen, who, according to his footer, was killed September 10th, 1944. He was also attached to the 29th Infantry Division, but in his case, he's with the 121st Infantry Regiment. The rough tally for Bedford County overall, I think Bedford County lost approximately 100 of its individuals involved in service for World War II. And that's, of course, including Bedford Boys, but in all other aspects of the conflict. So this grave we weren't expecting to discover. This is for First Lieutenant Joseph Danner, born October 4th, 1921, killed August 30th, 1944. He was killed in a crash that occurred at on an Air Force base in Stratford, England. He was attached to the 344th Bombing Group, 496 Squadron, the American Air Force. Now, Bedford is known for being the home of the National D-Day Memorial today, But after the Second World War, of course, that was not the case, and for a while people wanted to be quite quiet about the loss that had suffered. The first memorial actually bestowed to Bedford, Virginia was in 1954, and it's this marker right here. This was dedicated June 6, 1954, so 10th anniversary of the D-Day invasion, and lists the names of Company A, Company C, and Company F, those that were involved and lost their lives during the invasion of Normandy. The material it's made out of is actually granite from the Normandy beaches, particularly, or at least according to the Bedford Boys book, it is a granite from the cave where General Gerhardt had his headquarters the first night on French soil. So that's where this was quarried from. And I could be wrong, I believe there's a similar monument on Omaha Beach or the immediate area. I could be mistaken on that. Of course, you can see on the top, you have the very famous emblem of the 29th Infantry Division, the blue and the gray, representing the American Civil War lineage of the Bedford County area. Listing down for Company A, Abbott, Carter, Clifton, Coleman, Draper Jr., Fellers, who was the captain of the company, Pfizer, Gillespie, Hobach, another Hobach, Lee, Parker, Powers, Reynolds, Guizaza, Schenck, Stevens, White Jr., Wilkes, and Wright, as well as Yop. Hopefully I pronounced those correctly. Then you also had in Company C, you had Joseph Parker Jr., and in Company F, John W. Dean. Initially, 19 men were killed on June 6, but ultimately the casualties suffered from the immediate D-Day invasion would come up to 22 when you factor in Company C and Company F. And next to it, this was dedicated on July 4th, 1974 by the Peaks of Otter Post, number 2157 of the VFW and Ladies Auxiliary, in memory of all veterans who gave their lives in all foreign wars for the country. Back to this monument, this was dedicated, there were about 4,000 people that gathered here on the town, along the street here in front of the courthouse for this service. General Coda was expected to be one of the guests, but his health was failing at that point, so he did not attend. General Gerhardt did attend the dedication, however, so he was here and gave a full dedication for the services. Immediately adjacent to the county courthouse in Bedford, we got a large stone here commemorating Bedford's volunteer company from October 10th, 1774. So that's not even a Revolutionary War tablet. I believe this is for Lord Dunmore's War of 74, which we're filming in summer 24. So that would be 250 years ago, Lord Dunmore's War. If you want to know more about that, we have a video about the Battle of Point Pleasant, its only major fight, so check that out. But in any case, militia throughout the colony of Virginia were called upon to try to contest with a war between the colony of Virginia and tribes such as the Shawnee and the Delaware that were fighting over control of the Ohio River Valley. And one of those companies involved in that Virginian army came right out of Bedford here. So here they're listed. Their sergeants being Nicholas Meade, William Kennedy, John Field, Thomas Flipping, and you got all the other privates down here. Some of these names will sound familiar to you if you know about the Bedford Boys of World War II, like Overstreet. I'm looking down a little bit farther here, see if there's any other ones. White, Boyd, Stevens, of course. So although some of these guys, you could tell that their families, they were involved in the Bedford Boys of the World War II, their family roots go back pretty far here to Bedford County, to pre-Revolutionary War history. I even forgot to mention about the captain, Thomas Buford. And that is the story of the Bedford Boys and how Bedford, Virginia, a small American community, paid the highest price for freedom during the Second World War. If you enjoyed learning about the story, I actually encourage you guys, go in the description below. There's going to be a link to several sources to learn more in depth, including Nance's memoirs about the landing on D-Day and all the preparations the Bedford Boys went into doing it. I've read excerpts from it. I'm looking forward to read the full account. I picked it up at the Tribute Center. Both me and a humble collector did, so I am presuming it's going to be a very powerful memoir, so I'm already recommending it. Give it a thumbs up. I'm sure future me will give it a thumbs up. So yeah, be sure to check that out. Kershaw's book, The Bedford Boys, is how the Tribute Center put it, the Holy Bible of learning about Bedford, Virginia's role in World War II, so check that out. And if you want to be able to support this channel, be sure to hit the like button down below. Lets the TubeView algorithm know that you want to be educated on social media. You want to use social media for good. And if you want to follow us in our future adventures, be sure to subscribe here to Readout Productions. And if you want to go the extra mile and support us, you go to our Ko-fi page. We have a link in the description, and you could join the Garrison, our monthly membership that keeps us on the road. And do not forget our chauffeur for today, humble collector, who, if you actually want to learn more about World War II, be sure to go and check out his channel, as he collects all sorts of militaria from both world wars. Any final things to say?
Yeah, no, this Bedford's a great town. We've seen a lot of really interesting stuff, talked to a lot of great people over the past day, so definitely make the trip out here if you're in the area.
All right. Thank you guys for watching. See you next time.